Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we're reviewing Drive Away Dolls. Directed by Ethan Coen, Drive Away Dolls follows two lesbian friends on a road trip who find themselves on the run from mobsters with a briefcase. The film stars Margaret Qualley, Geraldine Viswanathan, Beanie Feldstein, Colman Domingo, Pedro Pascal, Bill Camp, and Matt Damon. So Jeffrey, what did you think about Drive Away Dolls?
Well, we only have one Coen brother here, but what can we say about the Coen brothers? The Coen brothers are some of the most important and intelligent and fun. Anything you can think of that makes film great is what the Coen brothers have been for, the past 30 years. They haven't made a film together since 2018's Buster Scruggs. What we've gotten is this film from Ethan Coen. 2 years ago, we got a film from Joel Coen about Macbeth. Yeah, so an adaptation of Macbeth. I think that confirms what we've always known, which is that Joel Coen is the film school guy. He is the one with great cinematography, who's super serious, who wants to adapt serious literature. And Ethan Coen is more of the ramsack, kind of rompous, fun director, right? The two of them together have this telepathy and they have this synergy that I think is extraordinarily rare in filmmakers, and they are very powerful together. But I think them separating just for a moment is really interesting because we get to look at them on their own terms as people instead of thinking them as this monolith, or they're often called like the two-headed director. So Drive Away Dolls, I don't know what I could say about Drive Away Dolls. I guess I can start with, I'm not sure that it's so much a bad film, but it wasn't really for me, I guess is what I would say. Which feels odd because its influences and everything that it seems to be building upon, say that kind of zany, absurdist, post-Tarantino vibe, is very much something that I heavily jive with. So I was really searching for why this film didn't jive with me necessarily. There are individual scenes that I thought were quite funny. It is like a very brisk 78 minutes. It's 84 minutes with credits, so it's not like you're going to waste a lot of time going to see this film, but something about it just didn't seem quite as smart or as structured or as surprising as I would have liked.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I do want to get into more deeper aspects of why that is the way it is, because I have a couple of notes on that. But we're going to start with Margaret Qualley and Geraldine Viswanathan, and they play the married characters of Jamie and Marianne, respectively. And so they are two friends, two lesbian friends who are very different. They're like polar opposites of each other. Jamie is this freewheeling, love is in the air, whatever.
Free love. Lesbian bars. Yep.
Very open and outgoing. It's like easier for her to talk to people and make friends. And then Marianne, on the other hand, she is a very buttoned up type of individual who just works a lot. The best scene that I could describe in this movie that describes who she is as a person is that she is at a bar and there's a big party going on around her and she's just sitting there like...
I was just about to mention that. And by the way, her friend is on stage.
Yeah.
So her friend is on stage, all this attention, and she's just sitting there like...
But like very proper too. Like she has like perfect posture, and
I think she's wearing a blazer.
yeah, she's wearing a blazer.
Oh, and doesn't someone comment how she should have changed before she came in? Yeah.
That gives you a whole understanding of her character. These two decide that they're going to a road trip to visit Marianne's family in Tallahassee. They decide to rent a drive-away vehicle or help. I think the drive-away vehicle is a mechanism for their travel to get to Tallahassee because they don't have to pay anything for it. On this drive, they come to find this briefcase that's in their car that was meant for these mobsters. Chaos ensues from that of them trying to get away from these mobsters and stay ahead of the game as they deal with the revelations of what's in this briefcase, which I found to be very funny, if not underutilized.
I agree, but we could just back up for a second. The concept here is very simple, and it's very Coen Brothers. It's just this very simple idea of people mistakenly put in a dire situation who find all of these hijinks and strange side quests along the way, right?
Yeah, and that is what the trailer gave me this impression of, which I was extremely excited for. I saw this trailer multiple times through all the other movies we've seen this year, and I was really excited for this film. I've had it in my calendar for months. The trailer was hitting me like this super bad Booksmart type film, which was very slapstick and screwball comedy that really envelops itself in absurdism. This film, sadly to say on my end, I felt like it was a little disappointing from that perspective. I didn't find it to be as outlandish as I thought it was going to be from the trailer. I think one thing about the Coen brothers is their movies are typically very dialogue heavy, and this movie does have a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation, but I'm not sure that conversation really amounted to much, especially when it comes to the narrative and their characters.
I think what's interesting is primarily I found myself finding ideas, concepts, and whole character arcs in the abstract very funny, but more so than I was was actually laughing on screen. Like, if I describe any of the characters in this movie, it seems like prime comical, farcical ideas that the execution and the use of these characters feels just really underwhelming, which I know that you were talking about earlier. The criminals, for instance, are these ragtag guys where one uses charisma and one uses veiled threats. And they have this dynamic through the entire film of being completely separate from one another in this interesting, odd couple. And they have a lot of fun scenes together. There's actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie involves both of them, but it doesn't feel milked to its comedic potential a lot of the time. I think it goes to this overall idea that there's a lot of very funny concepts. Like, you may think back on this film and say, wow, that's a very humorous idea, but I'm not sure in execution that it yielded the kind of laughs that I was expecting.
Yeah, it feels like everything in the film is almost just too surface level. Marianne, I really love that her character is this buttoned up individual that really has to break free of that. Her purpose and her reason for being so buttoned up in the first place isn't really explored at all. So when you get that payoff towards the end of the film where she starts to open up, it doesn't really feel like some sort of revelation. It just feels like, oh, this is where we went with it.
Yeah, and it's not like it needs to be particularly deep. I think it just needs to be established enough to be funny.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree, this film is so concerned with the breakneck, fast pace that it sacrifices a lot of the comedy it could have had if it just took a breath every once in a while. One thing I will say is something I enjoyed about the film more in its tone, I guess, but it has this refreshingly un-PC take on humor and a real, like, unabashed queerness that did feel like a throwback in the best way to almost like, I don't know, like a comedic Greg Araki or something. It's a film that doesn't care to be restrained or gentle in its approximations of what audiences are going to think about it. Like, I don't want to do a prolonged discussion because then half of our comments will be like Sound of Freedom weirdos and the other half will be like PC police. But there is like a newfound sensitivity that I think we're finding as a country and particularly in our entertainment. And we haven't totally found how to navigate what that comedy is, I think, in this new era. And this film does seem to bridge that gap a little bit. There's not a lot of brunts of the joke, so to speak. A lot of the jokes feel kind of harmless, even while feeling edgy at the same time. So I will commend it for that. I just don't think the jokes were particularly witty or particularly well structured or like anything that I personally find funny. This is something that I'll keep coming back to, but I think this film may be made for somebody who's just not me. I have this predilection of film that I just need to dissect everything I see. That's just who I am. And I think a lot of other people can watch a film as a fun romp and just have a good time. I'm not totally capable of that. I am capable of that when it meets certain expectations or like certain ways of structuring their films or structuring their jokes. This film just didn't really meet that for me. But at the same time, I think I could understand somebody going to see this film on like a date night and having a really good time, maybe going to see it with their friends, having a couple of beers. I do think it's kind of a fun romp, even if a lot of it is underdeveloped.
Yeah, that is the term I find myself coming back to, is the word underdeveloped, because I feel like so many of the jokes in the movie feel that way, or same with the narrative. But that being said, there are some really funny moments of the film. I thought Beanie Feldstein was one of my favorite parts of the film. I thought her character was so great. She's this disgruntled ex, basically has to bring her dog all the way to Tallahassee.
Very annoying dog.
Yeah, to give it back to Jamie.
Which, by the way, the funniest scene in the movie in my mind is when the two criminals go to meet her. I don't think this is a spoiler to say, but she's like beating up one criminal as she's having a discussion with another. And it's just so funny. It's so absurd. The film is absurd throughout, but I wish more of the film had that dichotomy between something normal and something absurd, because that's where the comedy really lies.
Yeah, and I forget the name of the guy that works at the drive-away place. Do you remember his name?
I don't. He's played by Bill Camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very funny.
And so he has this moment that's really funny if he gets beaten down to the ground, but he's there the entire movie. So every time we come back to him, he's just on the floor, incapable of getting up, but he's still awake.
Yeah, again, we talk about all of these concepts and they're so funny, but I didn't laugh at them in the theater.
Yeah.
Like so much of these ideas, this someone who's just beat up and can't move, that's so nihilistically hilarious to me in a Coen Brothers way. And yet this film just didn't like utilize that in its execution.
So in order to talk a little bit more about that, I do want to get into some spoiler territory. It's particularly what is in the briefcase. So if you want to wait to see the film to find out what's in the briefcase, feel free to do that, because we're about to talk what's in the briefcase. What is in the briefcase is a bunch of famous people and politicians cast dildos. In my mind, it sounds very funny. I love the concept of politicians hiding something that they do, especially conservative politicians. They can't be caught doing these things, even though they all do them.
Matt Damon's character harkens back to a conservatism, frankly, that I miss, that they were just these like weirdos who pretended that they were priests, but actually they're doing all this like crazy stuff on the side that they pretend is so reprehensible. Now we have a whole different iteration of that. But it gave me a whole like flashback to something that was very funny in those times.
It reminds me of how like every year they go through and they say the most searched terms on like sites, and the Bible Belt is always like the weirdest crazy shit.
Oh, yeah. The more repressed you are, the more weird it is.
Yeah. And so anyways, with these dildos,
Can I just say, for Movie Husbands history, anyway, but these dildos is one of the funniest interjections that we've had so far in our Movie Husbands career. So anyway, back to these dildos.
There is this final moment towards the end of the film where the briefcase opens up outside this lesbian bar and they go flying. But you don't see them at all. The briefcase is just sort of ignored after that in favor of Matt Damon, a shot being on him. I just saw like this ample opportunity for these dildos with the suction cups to like fly onto the window and just stick there and just swing or something like that. Like you were saying, all these things had so much potential going for them. It just seems like they were all underutilized.
Yeah, and the film is not above that at all. In fact, there's a prolonged joke where the ex is taking a dildo off of the wall and she's like, "This is yours," as she's crying. It's like,
That was so great.
yeah, I know. It was so funny. And I could almost see someone in the comments saying like, "Oh, well, you don't understand the Coen brothers. They're much more highbrow than that." But this film specifically is not higher brow than that. It's interesting to see because Tragedy of Macbeth was arguably far too stiff as a film. And this is maybe far too freewheeling. And you could see how when they're together, they're able to make such magic because they're able to balance each other's flaws and each other's positive attributes.
I think Buster Scruggs is a great example of that because it really balances the comedy, the cinematography, and the deepness as well.
Or Fargo.
Or Fargo, yeah.
Fargo is a very funny movie that makes me feel deeply sad. And it's very hard to do all those things at once.
So you ready to go to grades?
I am. I'm going to give Drive Away Dolls a C+. It's true that it's generally just like a very fun romp. I just kept wishing it would tie itself together in a more interesting way. Maybe gives us some more smart structure, maybe some dramatic irony or some kind of subtext for me to grab onto. The Coen brothers and Ethan particularly are some of the best writers of American caricatures in film and, you know, all of film history. So I wish this film utilized all of those attributes just a little bit more.
I completely agree. Subtext was something I had in my notes as well for this wrap up. I give it a C+ as well. I felt like there was so much. What?
No. We just.
Why are you booing?
Because we need to grade things differently. We always grade things the same. I mean, I now downgrade to a C.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm now a C.
All right. Okay. Anyways, back to the dildos. So. So the subtext of this film, and I think the dildos are a great representation of this, but there is this slight political commentary that is underneath this film. And unfortunately, again, I feel like it was underutilized. It comes in right at the end with Matt Damon, and it feels just very hollow, like it wasn't fleshed out at all. I've said that throughout this review, but that seems to permeate this entire project. I think all the actors were great. I really did enjoy them all. I think they had great chemistry, and I just felt like if they had more to work with, it could have been something really good here.
I feel like this was probably a lot of fun to shoot too, but I'm not sure it made a totally great result.
All right, and that's it for our review of Drive Away Dolls. Drive Away Dolls is now in theaters. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about Drive Away Dolls? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.